Okay, class, welcome back. We're still in Chapter 6, Stylelines. Today, what we're going to show is the princess armholes into the armhole seam. So this, if you're using your textbook, you can notice it's between pages 126 and 128. We're doing the princess seam into the armhole. So the steps here are going to be very similar to what we did in our previous exercise where they were in the shoulder. However, now there's some different kinds of blending techniques we want to take into account. We'll be working with our front bodice block. And as always, the same rules apply. Number 1, you need to establish your grain line. Number 2, we're going to trace off our block. And number 3, we want to mark our style line point. Now, a couple of things about the position of your style line when you're doing a style line into the armhole. You never want to create stress on the underarm of the garment, so the goal is to always be above the armhole notch. So in this particular example, we're going to be about 1.5 inches above the armhole notch. But this is a design detail, so it can be higher, it can be lower, but you need to at least stay away at least 1 inch away from the armhole notch, because this is what then goes into the underarm of the garment and it would create stress. So we're going to trace off our bodice block, armhole, shoulder, neckline, center front, our dart legs, our apex of our dart, and our side seam. And then we want to make sure we're marking where we want our new style line to go. So again, you can be 2 inches above the armhole and up down to 1.5 inches. Could be 3 inches above. In this particular example, we're going to do 2 inches above. So I'm going to mark 2 inches above the armhole. Just know, again, the key detail here is you need to be away from the true armhole notch. And then the same details apply on our dart as far as needing to ensure we have ease. So we're going to mark, again, 2 inches above the true apex and 2 inches below the true apex. Now, when you're marking the ease on your panels, you don't want to just create a one-to-one transfer parallel line to that bust point. You want to follow each individual dart leg. So you're going to need to rotate your ruler on each dart leg so that you're making sure you're transferring these. The final step of what you want to do is you're going to walk your pattern pieces together to make sure that they match. The goal is that the sewer is using these as a guideline to control the ease around the bust point. Then with regards to our style line here, we always need you don't want a curved point into that section. Just like when we have squared and trued all of our corners, we need this area also to be squared and true for at least 1/8 of an inch before we begin our style line. Then I'm going to take my French curve and gently blend this 2-inch mark back into the true apex of my dart. Then what we're going to do is we're going to separate these into 2 pieces and transfer the grain line to my side panel. So here on this piece, I've traced off my front armhole princess panel and my side princess panel. You want to make sure when you're transferring these over, copying these over onto your point paper, that you've left enough room to create seam allowance between each of the pieces. This front panel will be cut on the fold. So you'll open it up. It'll have its center front notch. You want to make sure you're transferring those ease notches into the seam allowance. 1/4 inch on the neck. Make sure you're transferring your shoulder notch to the seam allowance to line up your front and back pieces. Then on the side panel, just like on the previous example, we want to avoid a pointy piece here because that's going to create problems with the sewing and the cutting. If you were to create 1,000 pieces of this, eventually that's going to create irregularities in your production line. So what we want to do is, using our curve tools, the French curve, for example, we want to blend out. So you're going to, in essence, lose about 1/8 of an inch off of this pointed piece, and you want to blend that back into that 2-inch ease mark. So don't go more than 1/4 of an inch in when you're creating this ease. You're really dealing with about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of ease in through here that you want to blend out on that panel. Then make sure that we are, if you want these to have more of a mitering effect, we're going to find a perpendicular line here by connecting our 2 bottom hem points, drafting that, and then using our graph ruler, we can trace off our grain line. This Armhole Princess side panel, you want to cut 2. This Armhole Princess front, we're going to cut 1 on the fold. Make sure you're transferring your notches into the seam allowance, and you want to erase all the notches that were on your original pattern piece because you want to avoid them cutting into the actual fabric that you're going to be using. And that's how we will deal with the front. In the next exercise 804, I'll show you how to do the Armhole Princess panel on the back.